All right. Welcome, everybody. We'll give everybody a few minutes to get gathered here. I'm trying to do as best I can in my free time, which is very little, but as best I can to maintain kind of a pattern here of doing kind of the breaking news, stuff that comes out right away, trying to do those things live so that I don't have to go through production time and get the stuff out to you 48 hours later. What I am trying to do, and I'm trying to find out if I'm live here yet. It's not showing me I am. Let me check it out. But what I'm trying to do is get the news information to you, the stuff that I'm seeing, that I'm learning, that I'm hearing, that I'm reading about in real time, get that to you as fast as I can. So I'm trying to do those on live. I will let you know that we have some help coming here to kind of fill our docket with interviews, and I'll be doing a lot of interviews in the next couple of weeks. Some will be live, most will be recorded. But they will certainly be designed to bring on experts areas. I know a lot about a lot. But I know very little about some depth. And I try to bring on experts who've been doing this for their whole career or multiple careers to go deep into certain subjects. And that's usually done best conversationally. So in the next few days, we'll be booking a lot of folks for the show here coming up. So our first interview should launch tomorrow with a good friend of mine, Lucas Mack. I think you're going to love it. He's a great guy, great outlook on the life. We went through the question of what is the Great Awakening to you? And that's a great question to ask. I asked him that question, and I had never asked that question of myself before. And really getting a different perspective on life. I'm not here to be a news source. There's plenty of those, or a financial repository of information. Certainly glad to help any way that I can. But what I'm trying to do is be as eclectic as possible and gather as much information that's pertinent, that's viable, that's real, that's verifiable, and have deep discussions about it. So in the next few weeks, you'll see a lot more interviews and conversations, a lot of great guests that are lining up right now that we're putting in order for a bunch of interviews coming up. I think you're going to love it. So I think we're kind of ready to go. We're in place here today. Lack of sleep here in these days. These days are getting crazy, by the way. I do wish that we would go back a couple years ago when most of us were sitting around going, when's this stuff going to happen? And it's all happening now. So let me go ahead and kick this off here for today. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I don't have the chat feature up today, or I'd say hello to you all. But thank you for being here. Going to try to keep this as short as possible, which is very difficult to do in this day and age because there are so many things that are happening and there's a lot of information you need to understand whether or not that's important. So I'm going to try to share that with you as best I can, but I am going to kick off this episode, which will be covering the economy, mostly the economy in China, and we'll be covering how that works internationally, what that means to you, what's happening in the financial markets tells a story. Financial markets react to geopolitical events, and geopolitical events are really heating up right now, and it is going to be, I'm just going to promise you this, that in the next, call it 3 weeks, we are going to have internal division in this country like you have never seen before. It will be completely promoted by the propaganda machine of the centralized mainstream media. They will absolutely be stoking fires for a grander scale war, while actual normal citizens will be asking why. We will be printing more money. We will see global chaos break out in the next coming weeks, if not months. And it's important to understand what's happening by what could happen, understanding what could happen by watching exactly what is happening today and keeping a sharp eye on things. So let's get started. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Rice Report. I'm Eric Rice. Thank you so much for being here today. Let me kick this episode off. This is not an easy one to do. The news could seem like a bunch of words on a screen or a bunch of voices and a microphone. But the news tells a story of humanity at the current moment, in the past, and in the future. And what I'm seeing, and I'm no expert, I'm literally just a guy in a hoodie talking to you. I've been in many rooms, I know many people, I've done many things in my life, but I'm certainly not an expert on what life is or how things will turn out. But I have seen many a thing, and if you've been following me long enough, I'm pretty good at these things. What I will start this episode off by saying is that there's not a single person on planet Earth, not one. There is not one person on planet Earth that has ever experienced what we're about to go through. It is that the setup for what's happening right now is so unique to history, although there are many historical references that do repeat. But the collision course that we're on right now, if any of this stuff turns out to be real, which everything I'm telling you is real, but if it all correlates the way I think it's going to correlate with timing, there isn't a single person on planet Earth who has ever lived through what we're about to go through. So I know it's a somber way to start. God bless you all. So important in times like this where evil rulers are burning down their empires as they're being exposed. And that's exactly what's happening. When that happens, things get difficult. And that's where we need to come together. There is no one person that's coming to save your life. There are people trying to save this country, but that's not going to save your life. These are the times to get grounded in prayer and meditation and take time to read the Bible, read good old books that are about important things. Stop wasting your time on sitcoms and cat videos online. This is the most important period in human history. And this entire correlation of events or collision of timelines, whatever you want to call it, started hundreds of years ago. And I can pinpoint it all the way back to 1871 for certain, probably 1830, and it's now accelerating at hyperdrive. None of this is accidental. Nothing of what's happening right now is actual accident or natural occurrence. This is being driven, and you can either be part of the driven snow or you can be the snowplow. Those are the two ways to look at things. And I would prefer that people who pay attention to this show, that we are part of the snowplow in the opposite direction. So let's kick off this episode by understanding what's happening globally. Normally, I go right into government spending. Listen, I'll do that really quick. Deficit spending is now on track to hit $2.1 trillion deficit in spending by the end of this year. That is a massive number. It's a $400 billion increase this year. That's expected to increase by $700 billion next year. We are bankrupt. We have absolutely nothing left but a money printer. And I use that term a lot. And when I meet people who watch the show in real life, they always say, what do you mean by, do they print the money? It's a 9-to-1 ratio. So it used to be when they printed money, they physically printed all the money. Today, they print about 10% of an allotment. So 90% of the money that's technically printed in the market today is actually just transferred via digital money on a screen. But 10% is printed and put into circulation, and that does happen while they're pulling older money out of circulation, though there's no evidence or proof that any money is being removed from the system right now. That's a big thing. So let's get global. Global today. Global liquidity is down approximately 20% since the year 2022. Now, global liquidity is really tracked by the amount of cash available in the hands of central banks, which that tracking mechanism by itself is an awful tracking mechanism. Central banks are the evil tyrant that you fear. They are all owned by the same types of people, and they all control every society, every societal behavior, every government, every military around the world. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is 100% fact. If you spend the time, you'd know this. But global liquidity in 2022 hit an all-time high of $25 trillion. At that point in time, that equaled 25% of global GDP. So put it this way. If your GDP is kind of your gross earnings on your paycheck, so say your paycheck's $100,000. For every $100,000 you produce, your boss is keeping 25%. That's essentially where global liquidity was in the year 2022. Today, it's down $5 trillion. There's only approximately $20 trillion in central banks. And that is a very sharp decline from the year 2020. So while M2 money supplies are increasing, that's the number of number of dollars in circulation in checking and savings accounts. Global liquidity, that's increasing personal liquidity. Global liquidity is actually dropping. So this is a very strange occurrence to see. Normally they go hand in hand. I mean, you can look back 100 years since they've been tracking this. They normally go hand in hand. However, today they're going in opposite directions. And I've been tracking these anomalies, like gold and the stock market going up in the same day for 6 to 12 consecutive months. These are not normal occurrences. These are the analogy I gave last year is what you were watching last year is you're watching a glass of water spilled on a TV. And when the glass of water is spilled on the TV, you see the sparks and the screen is still there, but eventually the sparks start to take over. You start smelling smoke, it's shorting out, and the screen fades away. Well, we're right now at the part where it's about to fade away in the screen. And as I've used this analogy many times, the stock markets themselves are a balancing act. It's a medicine ball on top of a baseball bat. It just takes 1 pound of pressure to topple the whole thing over. And that pound of pressure doesn't always come from our country for our own stock market, to be frank with you. In China right now, they are printing money like it's going out of style. They're getting ready to do more. They have actually just launched a stimulus program. Now, stimulus programs for economies are not a sign of a good economy, but a very good indicator of a struggling economy. Most people have been saying, well, China's fine. They make all these products. They make all of our goods. I've been telling you for 2 years the Chinese market is a fallacy. Their stock market is a con job that our American politicians allowed to happen. There were billions and billions of dollars lost in Chinese stocks that had no cash flow, that lied about their reporting in China, and American investors were the largest victim of those scams. And I can even pinpoint it to the exact firm in California who did it, but I choose not to ruffle those feathers today. However, they have done a few things in China that are going to be replicated here at some point in time. And it's going to be, like I talked about, the very first post I put out when they announced interest rates. They announced them later in the day. Later that night, I posted out, I said, here comes short-term pleasure for long-term pain. And that's exactly what we're going to see. Stimulus stimulates, but ultimately, unless you fix the problem, the stimulation fades away pretty quick and the problem gets worse. In China, they are lowering interest rates like they never have before. They're dropping half a point, three-quarter point, and they're announcing that more rate cuts are coming. So as they lower this and signal more rate cuts, their stock market's up about 4.5%. It's kind of raging. Again, short-term pleasure for long-term pain. They're easing rules on second home purchases. Now let's think about that. What are the possibilities? Why is that so important, right? We have regulations here as well. You don't get as favorable a terms on a mortgage. It's difficult to get an application for a mortgage. You can buy any house you want in cash, but if you're mortgaging and financing it, there are strict rules around non-owner occupied homes. This isn't unique to America. This is in every nation in the world. And in China right now, they're reducing the regulations and the rates on second home purchases. Now, this is certainly an attempt to stimulate the Chinese real estate market to sell more homes, to occupy unoccupied residents. That's an obvious ploy. The other way to look at it is that they're lowering rates, and those who profit the most from lower rates are not people like you and I. These are people with massive bank accounts. Now they don't have to use their cash. They can borrow more money, and it's cheaper. This is, in my opinion, this is a play for the elites of China to be able to buy more real estate with less friction and at cheaper costs. So that whole theory that the World Economic Forum has promoted of you'll own nothing and be happy is beginning. It already began. It began in 2020 when they started allowing Chinese investors to buy 1/3 of the homes in California during that year. I lived there. I watched it. I tracked the titles. These were all Chinese corporations that were buying American homes in cash on the fly in 24 to 48 hours. They are gobbling up everything they can. And China is not the problem. China is part of the problem. But the real problem in this world rests at a much higher elevation than nation states. Now, they are also reducing their cash ratios for banks. This is a big signal as to what's to come. For those of you who don't know, in America here, we have a 7-to-1 cash to lending ratio, meaning you must have $7 in cash for every $1 you lend. So if you have $6 in cash for every dollar you lend, you are violating law, you will be fined, and your lending will be shut down. They are lowering this ratio, which means that they are also low on liquidity, which is why they're printing more money. China is the second largest economy in the world. They are only allowed to be that second largest economy in the world because of U.S. politicians. I really want you to keep that in mind. Never forget what has happened in the past because it's playing out today. And if we don't know this, the future will be darker than you can imagine. They were only allowed to get here because of U.S. politicians. Now they're making lending easier for second homes. Anyone can borrow money. They're printing money. And they know what's coming because in their documents, they are already putting on here that they are creating a stock market stabilization fund. That sounds like a really healthy economy that needs to print money to put it into account to stabilize the stock market. They're also getting ready to put together $100 billion in equity financing for the stock market in China. Nothing says we're fake, like fake money being printed to put into a fake stock market while we're lowering regulations for people with real cash to borrow money from banks that no longer need to follow a ratio guideline to lend money to those people to buy more real estate. China is being taken over again in a land grab and an equity grab that's being financed and sponsored by their central bank. I don't anticipate that this remains in China. I think that this will extend to every central bank throughout the world because what happens in these scenarios is that the banks do something, one central bank does something new, It works. They track it for 30 days, and then they say, well, it worked there, let's do it. Not giving it the 90 to 180 days it needs to run through to see if it's an effective program or not, and they all fail in the end. And the only people who win are the central banks, while you and I lose everything. That's what's happening. This is the second largest economy that is literally on its own knees, begging for forgiveness to the central bank so the central bank can change regulations, ease lending, provide capital for their stock market, prop it up and make their country look really good, while our country will go through its own trials. So we are in a financial war, and that financial war is always based on perception. So keep that in mind. It's a very important thing to have. Southwest Airlines is getting ready to launch a massive layoff program. They have not disclosed any numbers at all. But this is going to put a dent in the travel industry. This is, if you have less people, you can actually fly less people. You will have less flights going in and out, less people working at the gate. Southwest Airlines is a monster player in that space. And again, these are all viruses that spread to other bodies. This is going to spread into Delta and American. It's going to happen probably very soon. Unrealized banks and losses right now are 7 times higher than they were in the year 2008. An unrealized loss is something you are not privileged enough to have. An unrealized loss means I've made an investment, it's lost money, but I don't have to put it on my balance sheet because I'm a bank and my balance sheets always need to be good. They are fake, they are phony, and they are propped up. 7 times higher than the year 2008, point blank. So we also saw new all-time highs in gold. We've seen gold at all-time highs. We've seen annual highs in silver. We're seeing metals really skyrocket right now, really moving well. I mean, I anticipate at this pace that gold will break 2,700 by the end of the month. Whether or not that happens is not up to me, but the pace that we're on right now, it's very easy to see 2,700. I easily see $3,000 gold by the end of the year, and I definitely see somewhere around $38 to $40 for silver. These are indicators. They are investments, they are precious metals, they are industrial metals, and they are a useful vehicle financially for you, but they're indicators of what's to come. The old saying in precious metals are, metals only make money when there's blood in the street, and there's no blood in the street yet. But the pace that we're on with what I'm going to go through today is going to lead you to the same thinking that I have, that we need to be a little bit smarter and a little bit more prepared about the way that we handle our life, our finances, and our supplies. Because along with this, we have port problems coming up. Before I get into that, I just talked about M2 money supply, the money in checking and savings. Lynn Alden, who's a great macroeconomist, Lynn does a tremendous job. She actually paid to have a research done over the past 50 years, 50, maybe 70 years, to determine what asset classes actually ride along with M2 money supply. So when M2 money supply goes up, what asset classes actually perform the best? And you can look at S&P 500 and things like that. I just looked at gold and silver. Gold is 68.1% correlated to M2 money supply. So 68% of the time, gold moves directly with M2 money supply. Bitcoin, 83, the highest correlated asset to M2 money supply. So while central banks' dollars are depleting, ours are increasing. That money has to go somewhere. Bitcoin and gold, I will reiterate, are the two hardest assets on earth. Bitcoin, absolutely the hardest asset on earth. It's not as tangible as gold, but I would heavily look into Bitcoin itself. I'm going to be putting out I did a Bitcoin for Basics presentation for the Confident Investor seminar, which was a great event. Thank you, Sarah Sullivan, for the great event. Had a chance to speak with the CEO of Lear Capital, and which is a gold company. We had a great conversation about these things, an adult conversation about these things. And both of us, a gold and Bitcoin guy, both agree you need to have gold and you need to have Bitcoin. These are two pretty logical deductions. That will be going on my YouTube channel either later tonight or tomorrow morning. It is fully done and ready to go. So that'll be out for you along with that interview pretty soon. But we have port problems. I talked about this 2 weeks ago. It was just a memory and a curious moment in my life where I had remembered last year speaking with a bunch of longshoremen in Long Beach, California, that they weren't on strike, but they actually didn't have a contract from the union. So ports work in a very interesting way. Ports are owned by private corporations, which for a nation state wouldn't make any sense. This all began with Clinton, by the way. When the Panama Canal was finally finished, Clinton, per the news, handed the keys of the port or the canal back to the Panamanians. That's where it ends. What they don't tell you is that 10 minutes after that happened, the Chinese came in and signed a 99-year lease on the Panama Canal We do not control the canal that we paid for and funded and that lives were lost building and fighting for. That was actually given away by Bill Clinton right before he left office. And again, the process was simple. He gave the keys back to the Panamanians. The Panamanians then leased it to the Chinese. Yes, the Chinese control the most important canal in the United States. Now, the ports that are here, these are private companies. So even the Long Beach port is owned by a private company. They have no employees, so they work with the unions, and the unions provide the longshoremen. The longshoremen are always available. I know a lot of these guys. They work really hard. They're union guys, but they work really hard. I know, take that for what it's worth. And in the midst of their struggles, they have been trying to get an increase in pay since COVID. They were going to go on strike in 2022. They were convinced by the union officials who claim to have the best interest of the workers in mind. I'll just leave it there. And most of them support Democrats who support communism, who support what's happening in this country. Just leave it at that. But the longshoremen were fighting to have a new contract to get higher pay. They got a small increase to appease them, but they've been working without a contract at the ports really for the last 1.5 to 2 years. Well, now officially on October 1st, the ILA, I believe that stands for International Longshoremen Association, they are now preparing to go on full strike by October 1st. That is not just Long Beach. That is Virginia. That is down by Houston. That is every port in the country. This union controls every worker at every port. Unions have benefits, don't get me wrong, but unions also are a weapon, and they can be used in the wrong direction. The longshoremen are asking for, from the report I saw, the longshoremen are asking for a 77% increase in pay, which they're never going to get, because the port owners are trying to find ways of using robotics and AI to eliminate human labor. This is the beginning of the AI conquest. This is how it's going to turn out for the next 10 years until we actually have some substance behind AI regulation and robotics. But the long story here that is made very short is the fact that in less than 2 weeks, our ports are going to shut down. Now, that could be for an hour until they negotiate a new payment and get back on. So I'm not trying to be a doom and gloomer here, but it's important to know because most people in this country don't know that, and they're certainly not going to tell you on Fox News or CNN tonight. But on October 1st, the ILA will go on strike for better pay. And if they do that for, say, a week, the way that, 2 years ago I covered this topic, and most people never think about ports. 50% of the goods, food, and services that we fulfill in this country, so even people who provide services need goods from overseas because the Obama administration completely wiped out manufacturing in this country, and they're lying to you today, trying to tell you that manufacturing is coming back. Those are closed manufacturing centers that were reopened, and people are starting to get hired again. But when our ports shut down for 1 day, that's essentially kills 7 days of commerce. 7 days. So for every day these ports are closed, that's 7 days of GDP that will be hammered right before what I've been talking about for a long time, the October GDP report. So we not only have the bridge that was destroyed in Baltimore that has shut down shipping in that area, we've had to re-navigate and create new supply lines and logistics to get goods and services through that area. This could be a national problem. And again, I don't want to make an assumption that I'm not sure about or don't know about. What I do know is they are going on strike. That strike could last for 2 minutes. It could last for 2 months. I have no idea, but it sounds like a pretty good idea to get some non-perishable goods and some water. Just a helpful hint from a friend. So this is also going to impact the stock market in ways that you can't imagine. The stock market right now is already overinflated. Sometimes the evil tyrants of the world use these labor union disputes as an excuse for their own failings in managing things like the stock market. Here's some interesting information that came out yesterday. The S&P 500 is up 186% since 2014. Compare that to the MSCI, which is a global index of global stocks. That's only 29%. So somehow, miraculously, since 2014, now I could see through the Trump era where that made sense. But since 2014, our stock market is up 186%, where around the world, the average is 29%. It is really overinflated. Again, it's a medicine ball on top of a baseball bat. It just takes 1 pound of wind to blow it over. So that's what I have on the financial side today. I know it's not the greatest news out there, but I'd rather you know the truth than be told a lie, and you can make proper preparations. I will hold strong to a non-financial advice recommendation that the VIX, the volatility index, or UVIX ETFs that are out there, I maintain them as, in my own portfolio, a very good buy. I'd actually just doubled down on our position yesterday. And I think it's a great place to go because you want to have that counterparty, right? So the counter activity to the market itself. So if the market drops, the VIX generally goes up. It's not a promise. They can rig that like anything else, because we're also seeing the largest amount of shorts on crude oil that we've ever seen. A couple episodes ago, I talked about the fact that for the first time in the world, all the money managers across the world unanimously started shorting oil. Now, they know things because they work for central banks. They're financed by central banks, the large traders. They know things we don't. And it just makes sense to me to understand with this imbalance of the stock market, the fluctuations in the bond market's on triage. The sovereign debt markets around the world are on triage. They are literally on life support. But it makes sense to me that they would be shorting oil right now a week and a half or 2 weeks before the longshoremen in America go on strike. You're not going to need a whole lot of oil if no goods and services are entering this country. We consume something like 26% of import exports throughout the world. Now that kind of helps to explain why we're seeing all of these short positions in crude oil all around the world, because they know that this strike is coming. And on top of it, war is coming, and wars are fought for central banks, and both sides are financed by central banks. And central banks want to make sure that these wars go on as long as they possibly can so they can print money. So if I controlled the levers of power, I would certainly have all of my traders shorting crude oil so that my potential future warring nations could stock up on it and have a good old killing fest that I make a fortune on. That's just the way the world works. I'm not making an assumption. That is, I can back that up going back to the French Revolution. That's just the way that things work. So enough of money. That's a depressing topic right now, but one that you should be excited about. Correlated assets to M2, gold and Bitcoin, make a ton of sense. And hopefully the world is starting to see the opinion that there is kind of Bitcoin and really maybe one or two of the other projects. They're cute projects. They might make it very far. Many claim to have contracts that no one's proven and all these other things. But let's get into international affairs that meet with ours. So yesterday, a big thing happened. A few months ago, they were getting ready to sign the International Pandemic Treaty with the World Health Organization, which essentially would give sovereign power to the WHO for any sort of pandemic that broke out in the future. You know, because we didn't do a terrible enough job in the last one of completely destroying the world and creating more MK Ultra fear-based programming in the world. Now we needed help from a global organization that's primarily sponsored by Bill Gates. That was negated. That was voted a no upon the other day. So that didn't work. And this is the way that things work. If one bill doesn't pass, you change the name, you run it through someone else, you make up a whole new story of how it's good for everyone, and then you pass that bill under an assumed name in the quiet of the night where no one notices. So the UN just got together. This is literally every nation in the world. They signed a contract for the International Health Regulations, which is essentially the same thing. I'd give a lot of credit to Chris Sky. I wouldn't have known this. He follows this stuff a lot. I saw his video, looked through some documents this morning before I went through this today. Some really shocking things that are on there. Essentially, you have no health sovereignty now due to this contract that was signed by all nations throughout the world. There wasn't one dissenting nation, which tells you a lot about our leadership. We have no leadership. Our leadership is fighting against us. They just signed over sovereign power to the United Nations for anything concerning health. Now they mask this by saying in places with states and provinces that states and provinces will have final authority. But those who run your states and province are also members of the same club, and they're going to do the same thing, which is why you need to be active locally. But this international health regulation put out by the UN is two big things that he pointed out, and I think they're the two biggest. Number one, you must be vaccinated to leave your nation. And number two, gene therapy can be forced upon you for healing. This is where the overall march to communism starts creating health camps, which are concentration camps, to put you in there and re-educate you while they give you gene therapy and shoot you with vaccines, because it's now international law. It's not just law where you live. These are really trying times for this stuff. So piecing these together as we go, because there's a very simple story to tell to see where we're going with the events of the last 48 hours. So keep that in mind. Next is the election. I'm not going to get too deep into U.S. politics because everyone else does a pretty good job of that. And to be frank with you, it's all fake. It's all boring. They already know the outcome, and we already know what's coming. There was just a Zoom call released on the Gateway Pundit today that there was a Zoom call between Democratic officials and celebrities trying to figure out a way to create a narrative to steal the election. We are watching some states fight back, some regions, some counties, and forcing voter ID, same-day voting. But voting began last week. Just the simple fact that it's been normalized that you can vote a month and a half before an election. I will promise you, something will happen around Halloween, call it the 28th through November 2nd, that would completely change the voting structure of 40% of the people who vote. It's the same thing that happened with Hunter Biden's laptop. They silenced that. Nobody knew. When people finally figured out that that was a real laptop showing collusion and crimes committed throughout the world, I think the stat, if I remember right, was 29% of people who voted for Biden would have voted for Trump if they knew about the laptop. When you have early voting, you've already cast your vote. You don't know what's going to happen between now and the election. And by the way, this is the crazy season, right? We are now in fall. There's plenty of astrological signs that'll tell you we're in a crazy season. But the mere fact of the matter is that we have a lot of people voting one way or the other way ahead of time. And that's generally your party line towers. These are your strict Republicans, your staunch Democrats, that they don't care if the devil himself was running, they're still going to vote for their party. And we're watching that stuff take place right now. So that is happening. Ballot harvesting boxes are going out in 3 states right now. So not only, excuse me, not only can you go out and vote early, you can now go out and grab your buddy's mail-in vote and put it in for him, along with 300 or 400 people that you get paid $100 a vote for. You take a picture of it at the ballot box, you send it off to the cabal, they send you a nice Venmo. It's under $600 so you don't get taxed. This stuff is all happening again. Prepare for it. I've been saying for a long time, Trump will get 80% of the actual votes in this country, and on election day, they'll tell us that Harris won. Prepare for that. We're going to go through this in the next couple of weeks. What do we do if that happens? And we're going to have some people on here and interview and give some ideas of what we do to take control of our country again, because we have zero control of our country at this point in time. And that's evidenced by another thing that's happening in Congress today. They are now proposing a constitutional amendment in Congress. They're proposing an amendment to the Constitution for what they're calling mass casualty events. In the event of a mass casualty event, they want to be able to quickly replace congressmen. Now, one side of this could say that that's a good verification and an option in continuity of government. And I believe that. The other side of the table is, if something bad is happening and a bunch of people are being killed, and I don't know what that would be, that could be, jihadists breaking out in this country because we've allowed 10 million of them in the last 3 years. We've allowed 30 million of them in since Obama, because this was supposed to be the most Muslim-friendly country in the world, per Obama. I'm not making that up. He made that statement on air. This is a Christian nation. This was founded as a Christian nation. It needs to get back to being a Christian nation because our culture is being eroded. And that is on purpose. They are defiling faith by bringing in other faith and supporting them financially. I digress. Lawmakers are now creating a mass casualty event amendment to the Constitution. This is not something to take lightly. This is not something to say, oh, those kooks over there, what do they know? I think they know a lot more than we do, and they always do, and that's why they take those positions. And I think we should all be very concerned about what they're trying to do here with this bill being passed, because in the end, when you authorize these things, this is going to make the Patriot Act look like kindergarten. If you have the ability to swap out elected officials on a whim because of a mass casualty event, you have the right to remove a president for anything that goes against the grain of the common theme or narrative of Congress. These are slippery slopes that we're walking on right now. These are so slippery. It's unbelievable. Now, at the same time, Anthony Blinken is now under investigation and trying to remove Anthony Blinken, who is our Secretary of State. He's completely worthless. So removing him wouldn't matter anyway. I mean, one of Mike Lindell's pillows could do a better job than Anthony Blinken. But they are trying to remove him. And let me just set the premise straight with this scenario here. People get excited about this because he should be removed. Anthony Blinken is a dual citizen of Israel. He is never going to be removed. In fact, if they do remove him, he'll get a better position with more money, speaking engagements, and books. Until people start getting arrested for treason in this country, that's exactly what's going to happen. And I do believe that time will come. I don't know when. So while all this is happening, a gentleman named James Lee on Twitter who does a great job, and I hope he's watching this. I doubt he does. I asked him to be on my podcast. He never returned my DM. But James Lee, you do a great job. I don't care if you're snubbing me yet. You're going to be on here. We're going to have a good conversation. James Lee has done an incredible job covering Israel recently, as well as the technocracy that's trying to shut down free speech in this country. They've already done a great job. But he put out a video that talked about Google's pre-bunking program. That's correct, pre-bunking. So they want to debunk misinformation before it even gets to your hands. Why would they be putting that in place right now? What's coming up in 40 some odd days? This has all been pre-planned. The person who is putting this in place is a lady named Jasmine Green, who's the head of Jigsaw, which is a subsidiary of Google. She is the CEO of Jigsaw. She's also the chairman of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which James points out so accurately that is essentially Israel's lapdog, watchdog in this country. So they don't want you to talk about Israel. You can't talk about the election, and they're going to pre-bunk everything that you put out ahead of time. When people tell you can't talk about someone, that's generally who's in charge, and Israel is in charge of this country, regardless of what you've been taught in churches. That is not the same. We'll leave it at that for this episode. George Soros just got permission to buy a conglomerate of radio networks that are heavily conservative leaning. Now, people are upset about this, but two of the main names that are on this list are Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck. These guys are already in Israel's pocket. They are already lapdogs for Israel, so it's not really a big play there. But he will have some say over what they can conduct on air. So you can expect more war propaganda and bloodlust for innocent lives being lost all throughout the world coming up, led by George Soros, the devil himself. These things are real and they're happening. I will give a shout out to Mike Ryan over at TNT News that just shut down on Friday. TNT News was a patriot network that was created on the whim to try to share truthful information throughout the world. They built up to 42 shows. I've been on plenty of those shows. All of you guys, if you ever watch this, and I know some of you do, y'all did an incredible job there bringing truth to people and sharing information that the world wasn't letting them hear. However, they were just shut down from a lack of investment. Their investors didn't want to put more money, from what I can gather, and I haven't talked to Mike about this, so I'm not putting that together. But the network was going great, growing everywhere, and then Israel-Gaza happened, and some of the show hosts talked about Israel in the same way of Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck, and some of them talked about it in a truthful manner, pointing out facts and inconsistencies in stories, which no one should be excluded from having the facts shared about them. If we were transparent and cared about the truth, everyone would face judgment. But they were just shut down last week, and thank you to all of you at TNT News for all the work that you did. You all did an incredible job, and I just pray to God that you all land on your feet very soon. These things are happening in real time and in real life. Before I get into Israel, Sean Combs has provided more humor for us today, as sad as that is. I did an episode on that on Saturday. Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy. Again, he's not the top of the pyramid. He's the tip of the iceberg. His masters go through all the global networks throughout the world. These people are perverted and they're sick, and they use blackmail to control everyone else. And everyone's starting to see this. So I don't need to cover this too much in this episode here, but they are now moving him to the same prison area as Sam Bankman-Fried, the fraudster from FTX. Just check out some of the memes online. These are hilarious. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to get too much into the adult humor on this episode. I hope kids watch this show and learn things. Ryan Routh, whatever his name is, the second attempted assassin of Donald Trump, his son was just arrested for possession of child pornography. If you think that child trafficking isn't an issue, where did the kids on the milk box go? Where did they go? When I was a kid, I grew up, there was missing kids in every milk box. The post office had posters everywhere. Where did they go? You cannot get away with anywhere between, and these are estimates, anywhere between 500 and 800,000 children go missing around the world every year. And until the last couple of years, you never heard about that on the news. You don't see many arrests. You're starting to see a lot more arrests in the last 2 years. Many child sex trafficking rings are being shut down throughout the world, and amen for that. That is God's work being done, but they all need to be shut down. And it'll only be known when high-profile people are exposed for the things they do behind closed doors. These people do not serve the same God that we do. In fact, no one serves the same God that we do. We were separated from this world because we are not of this world. But it's important to understand how deep this darkness goes. This is a People will say it's a mental health problem, that people are sick. People are possessed. People have allowed demonic entities to possess them, and this is exactly what the devil would do if he ran the world and had no friction from God. He would brutalize children in high positions of power. We were warned about this in Ephesians 6. But nonetheless, look at the correlations of people. Who wants to kill Trump the most? Oh, the people who traffic children for sexual pleasure. Are you starting to get the picture of this election and how important it is? So let's move into Israel. We have now authorized the movement of more U.S. troops into the Middle East. We have, I don't even know the exact number, about 15,000 Marine and naval personnel out there. These are American lives. A lot of them are Christian lives that are going to be fighting for Jews and Muslims. I want to put that out there. I don't care of the repercussions. I don't care what your indoctrination is. These are Christian lives, American lives that are going to be sacrificed on someone else's soil for a war that is clearly offensive. Clearly. Yes, every nation in the world has the right to defend themselves. I absolutely agree with that. But when you start defending yourself by masking bombs as toys and blowing up children and blowing up pagers and markets with innocent people, that is an offensive measure. We are sending money, we are sending armament, we are sending bombs, missiles, tanks, guns, and ammunition to Israel and to Ukraine, who are using these weapons of war in other nations, making us the attacker by proxy. That's so important to understand, because remove biblical teaching, remove mainstream media propaganda, look at the facts. If you lived in one of those countries, America is part of the problem as well. We are part of it. We are sending the weapons that are killing the innocent people, and they all know it because we announce it. We just sent another $375 million to Ukraine today. That's more American bombs that will be used within Russia. Russia is heavily nuclear armed and preparing for this. They are preparing for nuclear trade-off. Israel is exceptionally nuclear armed. In fact, they have hidden nuclear weapons called the Samson option. So if anyone ever figures out that Israel is not what it appears to be, they can push a button and vaporize the world. You should understand that. Research the Samson option. I'm sure that the first 2 pages that you search on Google will say it's a conspiracy theory. But if you actually read into books and you look at John F. Kennedy, he tried to inspect these weapons, and they've made an entirely fake war room of fake missiles and fake command centers, and they're storing away nukes somewhere else. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a very well-known fact, and it's becoming very dangerous. I will reiterate this. I am not pro-Hamas, and I am not pro-Israel. I am pro-America, period. I am not pro-Muslim. I am pro-Christian. Christian, period. If you don't like that, there's plenty of shows on YouTube to watch, but I would ask that you stay here and learn some things along the way. It's important to understand that most of these countries don't have militaries that would last 5 minutes with the American. 5 minutes would be a long time. Palestine has no army. They have no formal military. They barely have a government at all. And now 95,000 of these people have been killed. Why? Well, it's very interesting because Netanyahu came out last week and talked about his new Project 2035, where they plan to level the Gaza Strip, which would involve killing everyone who's there. 85%, kind of interesting, Johns Hopkins did a DNA sample of a huge DNA study in 2013, and what they found out was that 80% of the people who live in Palestine actually have Hebrew DNA, and only 2.5% of the people living in Israel have Hebrew DNA. That's not a conspiracy theory. It used to be on Johns Hopkins' website until last week when they took it down. So the nation of Israel is fighting a country, and they're garnering your support, saying, we're being attacked every day. We have sent them $30 billion to restock the Iron Dome. Yes, they're shooting missiles from 1986 into Israel. That is happening. Most of them are taken down by the Iron Dome. There is no Iron Dome in Palestine. There is no Iron Dome in Lebanon. And now 1,300 new locations have been attacked in Lebanon. If you live in Lebanon or you live anywhere in the world, you can't see this as a defensive measure. You just simply can't. This is an offensive war. This is a little brother knowing that big brother will fight his fights, that's going out and picking a fight with everyone, knowing that big brother will come in and destroy them. That is exactly what's happening. I don't care what anyone's opinion of this is, because those are the facts. Now, they plan to level Gaza. Gaza has a lot of oil, by the way, and it has a port and a beautiful beach. So what a great plan. Garner support from your largest ally. That, they're called our greatest ally. I've still not seen what Israel has ever done for America. I've only seen what America has done for Israel. And if I talked about the same topic about the nation of Germany or the nation of Hungary or the nation of Taiwan, no one would ever argue with me on that. They have done nothing for America. Neither has Israel. Israel has done nothing for America but take our money, period, and buy our land. Most people don't realize how much money is actually in this country from Israel that owns American land. I digress. Another thing that goes along with this, we should all understand. I put this out on my Telegram a few days ago, and some people were shocked by it, and some people were appalled by it, and that's just part of the game, because truth is truth, and sometimes truth hurts. In 2017, the leader of ISIS in the region, his name that he went by was Abu Hafs. That's the name he went by. He was arrested, he was incarcerated, and they verified that his actual name was Benjamin Ephraim. He was from Israel, and he worked for Mossad. If you don't know who Mossad is CIA, the CIA of Israel, and they're far more powerful than our CIA, point blank. So isn't that interesting? Mossad agent goes undercover, becomes the leader of ISIS. ISIS blows things up and attacks Israel so that Israel can bomb the entire region with the support of the United States, ultimately taking more land, killing more people, and gaining more ground for their own purposes. This is what's happening in Israel. I still have this argument with people all the time, and it drives me nuts. People on hang gliders cannot penetrate the most impenetrable wall in the world. They just can't. And over again, these evidences come out. This is not from Us Weekly or the Inquirer. This is a internationally known thing. In 2017, the head of ISIS was actually an Israeli Mossad agent. So you know what? I bet they probably stopped doing that, and we should just believe that goat herders have massive amounts of armaments that come from Iran, even though Israel gives money to Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah through Iran, which actually all that money filters through Qatar. This is how the money system works. We are being gaslit to support a war that will end up being fully nuclear capable within a matter of minutes, with nations that have hypersonic, just like we do, probably better. It's not long until Turkey ends up joining BRICS, destroying NATO. And while that happens, when Turkey does that and completely leaves NATO to join BRICS, we are going to be losing another massive military in the region that's also nuclear capable. Pakistan has already applied for BRICS. That's the 6th largest country in the world and the 4th most powerful nuclear nation. We are building an enemy base that cannot be defeated in any typical warfare at all. Between Russia, Turkey, and Pakistan, as well as China, India, these other nations are fully nuclear armed, and we are just siding with the big bully who's out there killing people all day and having fewer and fewer allies as time goes on. While this is happening, these are facts, and I'm not denying, yes, Israel is being attacked because Israel is attacking. It hasn't stopped since the 50s. This has been this way since the 50s. It just has been. Everyone's tired of it. No one wants the war. If you're endorsing war, you're endorsing the end of it all. Like, that's where we're at. But while this is happening, our southern border is being flooded. And one of the main NGOs or nonprofit organizations that's doing this is called HIAS. That's the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Little tip for everyone out there when you're researching things. If a nonprofit or an NGO ends its name with the word society, it's probably part of George Soros's plan for America. He runs the Open Society. Anything that ends in society ends up destroying the American society. So all of these migrants are coming through here. There's about 40 NGOs that people can name. About half of them have very strong ties to Israel. That's just a fact. Their borders are closed, but our borders are wide open. And what they're doing is they're creating more refugees. So think of this logistically and tactically. If I'm in the Middle East and I bomb every Middle Eastern country with U.S. weapons, I'm going to make them hate Israel, which they already do, and I'm going to make them hate America. So then what I'd do if I was an evil ruler is I would find a way to funnel them halfway across the globe and put them right into enemy territory, sneaking them in through the southern border and also the northern border coming from Canada, who's completely capitulated to globalism. This becomes one of the most dangerous times to be an American in American history. This is one of those times in history where I hope that we begin to see the truth and stop looking through dogma for a solution. These are factual things that are happening. When one nation creates more refugees and the same nation who created the refugees sends them to you, they're not your ally. They're your enemy. That's from a military and political standpoint. Now, the mere fact that everyone in this country seems to be blinded by the fact that they're doing these things is astounding to me, and I'll probably be banned from YouTube for this video. And I don't really care anymore. I never cared to be here. I'm waiting. It's a ticking time bomb with the amount of emails I get from them anyway. I will be on Rumble, I will be on iHeart, and I will be on Spotify, and you can still follow me there. But these are things that need to be said. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I'm bringing on some biblical experts in here that will absolutely walk through this entire scenario. This is all part of a larger plan. Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia. By the way, Ukraine's interesting. Who occupied Ukraine? Anyone ever hear of the Khazars? Well, they ended up taking over Israel, and that's a historical fact. Period. So Ukraine, Israel, all these things, they're all part of a much larger plan to subdue the entire world and put us into communism, and America is the crown jewel. Whew, that's a lot to cover for today. Wanted it to be a short episode. We're a little under an hour right now. I don't have access to the chat, or I'd see what you're talking about. Actually, some of you, I might not want to see your comments right now. Give things time. Give things time. Time cures all. If what I'm saying to you is offensive to your thought process, you're welcome. It needs to be challenged. We are being taken for a ride by globalists. They are using every possible psychological angle to get us to support them running the world. The UN has already signed this treaty. Our markets are on a razor's edge right now. Most people don't have difficulty finding a job, and more layoffs are coming. My wife's company is announcing layoffs on Friday. So this is the reality that we live in right now, and it has never been a better time in the world to seek faith. It has never been a better time. Through these times, what we have in America is we have ourselves and we have a relic of culture. I'm going to continue to ask this question every episode. What is the American dream? What is the culture of America? Other nations have very clearly defined cultures, but our melting pot has no culture whatsoever. In fact, we only have degeneracy. That's all I can see. I'd love to go back to a time where America was mom, pop, and apple pie, but I think those days are probably behind us. And I think if Americans don't start shaping this new culture, this new future, I'm afraid that future will be given to us by tyrants who have very little of our interest in mind, in fact, none. I think it's time for us to stand together to understand that foreign wars are foreign wars. They are designed to kill people in other nations while we pick a political side and argue with each other. That's what happens. That's all I've seen since I was a child. It's time for us to start saying, we need to put America first. We need to put our interests first. And before we do any of that, we need to put God first in our lives. We need to find a way to balance ourselves through these very unstable times and be able to find a pathway that finds us happiness and joy in a life that's filled with grief and anxiety. Take the time to meet your neighbors. Take your time to meet somebody new, just to smile at them. I think it's always one of those traits. A friend of mine was on the TV show Walking Dead, and he gave a speech, which was kind of cheesy. But he mentioned all these things that had happened in his life, and he said, "And yet I smile." And that is the attitude we need to take. But we need to stop. We need to stop listening to dogma and start listening to reality. We need to stop listening to theories and facts and start understanding exactly what's happening in this world, because it will not change if we don't say anything. That is the one guarantee I can give you as an American for 47 years. Things do change when people come together and they start voicing an opinion. Politicians are weak-spined people to begin with. But until we actually come together unified and actually have the same message of change that we want, our masters in Washington, D.C. and their masters in Israel will never make a change. And I'm going to say this point blank, 88% of our Congress has dual citizenship with one nation, not Russia, not China, not Germany, not France, not Japan, Israel. AIPAC controls and buys every seat. They brag about it. Actually take some time and see what they say about Americans. This is not our ally. It's not our ally. They're not proving it by action. Their fruit is not, their tree is not bearing fruit. Jesus told us, you will know them by the fruit they bear. Are we actually following the words of Jesus and using our energy, time, our money, our efforts, our voice? Are we using those things properly right now? Because I don't believe we are. And I may be very divisive with this conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. That's part of the maturity process involved in a great awakening. The awakening is there's just us. There's just us. There's the Americans. There's the body of Christ. Whatever group you want to join, there's just us. And we need to come together. We need to be strong, and we need to make changes. And we need to do things that improve the kingdom of God, because if the kingdom of God on earth is improved on earth, then all life throughout earth flourishes. So take a little time today. Take a breath. This is a lot of stuff happening. You can see the setup. You can see congressional changes to the Constitution for mass casualty events. You can see every market on a razor's edge. Gold soaring before the market crashes just tells you where it's going to go. Bitcoin in the same category. You're watching one nation create refugees and then using our donations and our money to bring them here against our will. These are things that are absolutely happening. Absolutely happening. So thank you so much for being here on this Tuesday evening. We're right at about an hour. We'll have an interview pop out tomorrow, maybe a Bitcoin video tomorrow. I'll be back on Thursday. I've got a bunch of stuff going on for work. There's a lot of people want me to cover some macro stuff that's happening in the world, and I'm thankful for that, thankful for those opportunities, and thankful that people actually want to hear what I have to say, because about 5 years ago, talking like this, no one would have hired me or listened to me. So thank you so much for being here tonight. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless this amazing nation. May we all come together and unify and make the changes that are necessary. Until next time, my name is Eric Rice. This is the Rice Report. Thank you so much for coming. I hope to see you again. Have a good evening.